Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My name's Caitlin, and I'm gonna be reading some spooky stories, scary stories, ghost stories, pretty much any kind of creepy stories that you can think of. This is my first video, so bear with me. I'm gonna be reading some stories from, the internet. I've asked for permission and I'll give credit to the people whose stories I'm reading. Hopefully I get to a point where people are watching my videos and people want to send me in some of their own videos. So we're going to try that. I have a microphone and we'll see how it works. I've never done this before. I'm recording separate from my camera. So we'll try and work it out. But like I said, this is my first video, so please bear with me. If you enjoy the video, please subscribe. And yeah, let's hang out. So we're gonna start. And I haven't pre-read any of them. I tried not to click on any ones that said, that had like a trigger warning on there. I don't really want to do those just yet. But they're mostly short. Some of them might be long. So we'll be able to get through a good amount. This next one is by care_HopeXO. And it's called, okay, so the creepiest thing happened to me a few days ago. So for some context, I'm a 26-year-old female and also live currently with another female roommate who hasn't been here a lot lately due to the fact she's been staying at her boyfriend's house. We've both only been living here for half a year, about 6 months, so a pretty good while, but not years. I feel safe in this house typically, but that all changed a few nights ago when I was there alone. The doors were locked, thank goodness, but I was in the kitchen, and in the kitchen, the window above our sink looks out into the back of our property, and there's just straight up woods in the back of our house, so we've never bothered to get a curtain for our kitchen window because there's nothing back there. It just hasn't seemed like a priority. Facts. Relatable. So, I'm in the kitchen making some ramen on the stove, which is right next to the sink, and I hear something outside the window. So I looked out there, and there was a man standing there looking at me. Holy shit. No, thank you. He ran away, obviously, but I didn't know if he was trying to get in or what. So I called the police and then my father. The police were so nice, but because he was gone by the time they arrived, they couldn't do much. I have cameras for the sides and front of the house. They told me to get one for the back, and if he comes back, to call them and they'll handle it. I'm not staying here anymore. I ordered a ring from Amazon, set it up, and I've been watching the house from my family's for a week. I don't know when I'll feel safe enough to return. I'm really scared. That legit is one of my worst fears. My parents live in the middle of orchards, and it's always been a fear of mine, when I would go over there, or even when I lived there, to be doing the dishes and look out and there's somebody standing there in the middle of hiding in between the trees. That's terrifying. I'm glad you got a ring camera for the backyard. That seems necessary. And also, like, why do people do that? It just so happened that you heard something and looked over there and noticed him, but how long had you not noticed him? How long was he standing there? You know what I mean? Like, that's bizarre to me that I would never want to look in somebody's house, like just stand there. No, thank you. This is by Van Dash Meditation. Friends, creepy religion, and a weird sleepover at his house. Okay, folks, so this happened when I was 14. I'm 29 as of the time of writing this. I remember this story from time to time, meaning like once or twice every few years. It still gets me in a weird mood for some reason. Anyways, I was walking with one of my friends in the city the other day. I tried holding her hand, but then she thought I just bumped into her and apologized, so I was able to recover smoothly. Then I saw a group of kids skateboard past us, and lo and behold, that was the thing that sparked this memory, so I figured I'd write it down. So I'm not going to use this kid's real name, so I'll just call him Vinny. I come from a town where the people you went to school with in kindergarten were the same kids you graduated with. Me too. Vinny moved to our school about halfway through the year. When new kids came to our school, everybody flocked to them. At 14, I was kind of a dork, but also kind of a douche, which makes me surprisingly likable to most people. Vinny would always sit by himself during lunch. Something I found amusing about him was that he would get infuriated if people asked him if he skated. I took that as a challenge to try and piss him off, and it worked. The first time he and I had class together, I remember the teacher asking him if he had his books yet. He responded with, "My wife never confirmed my school schedule with the front office." I remember everybody thought that was funny. You're 14 years old and you have a wife? He was clearly trying to get one over on the teacher. My friends and I were skating after school and we saw Vinny. I remember talking to my friends about what he said, and we all became oddly infatuated with this kid. It took some doing, but after about a week of letting him hang out with us, he became one of the boys. One of my buddies asked if we could go sleep at his house on Friday night under the guise that we took turns at staying at each other's houses to skate, play video games, and smoke the green stuff. He looked perturbed, which is something I wish mattered to me back then. But the next day at school, he did say it was okay after asking his parents. My buddies and I rode on our bikes to where he lived with clothes for the night and our skateboards strapped to our bags. We met his family, who at face value seemed completely fine. Then things got a little weird. First, his dad had a huge weapons collection. Red flag. At the time, I thought it was awesome. He even took us out into a field by a canal to shoot some of his assault rifles.
I know.
This wasn't cool of him without parents' consent. No, for real, it's not cool of him to let you 14, you said you're 14 at the time when this was happening. So I imagine if you were 14, the other children around you and your friends are of similar age, 13, 14, maybe 15. And he's just taking you out there and letting you guys shoot ARs and like, what? But, okay. Next, we met Vinny's wife. Yeah, the girl was real. She was also 26. Ugh. While we lived in the southern U.S., even this was taboo. They would like hold hands and stuff. At the time, we thought this was dope. It was like dating a senior when you're a freshman, only he was in high school and she paid taxes. What in the world, man? What? Okay. Things kind of got to a new level of weird when Vinny's dad had his arm around Vinny's mom and his other arm around a girl that couldn't have been terribly older than we were at the time. Apparently, that was also his wife. We then spent about 2 hours praying with the family in the living room. I was raised Catholic, but couldn't determine which religion they were practicing. It sounds like there's some sort of, is it like LDS religion like that, you know, like they're polygamists or they're super religious and like the women have to wear their long dresses to their ankles and, you know, cover their wrists and, you know, you guys know. All right. Once we finished with that, we went outside to start skateboarding. After a few minutes, his dad came outside and ordered us into the house. Vinny's mother then had us stand in line outside of the bathroom to take a bath. Inappropriate. What the hell? It still skeeves me out, but I remember we weren't allowed to drain the water from the tub. I was the last one to bathe. Also, all of the mirrors in the house were covered with sheets. I don't know the significance of this. It makes more sense to me to not have mirrors at that point. Seriously, like if you're, but you know, I do understand having the mirrors covered because I'm weird like that. Like mirrors kind of freak me out. So, and my grandma, I'm Mexican. My grandma told me when I was younger that like spirits and stuff can get trapped in mirrors and they can like come out at nighttime and stuff like that. So that's probably just like low level trauma and PTSD on my end, but I can understand covering the mirror. But if all of your mirrors are going to be covered, why even have any mirrors? Like they said. So I don't know, that's weird. And why is another adult, why is Vinny's mom giving, they're 14 years old, why is she giving anybody a bath? Why is she giving Vinny a bath? That's inappropriate. That's weird. and then you're giving his friends baths? That's weird. Like, that's bizarre. That's very. I have kids. I have a son. My son, he's small, but if he got bigger and he told me he went to his friend's house and that was boy, that is crazy. We were told to go to bed even though the sun wasn't even down yet. Vinny went to bed with his wife. The three of us that remained just laid there in one single queen-sized bed and talked about how much fun we weren't having. The final straw for the night was having to hear Vinny's parents, and maybe the other woman, doing the dirty in the next room. Oh my god, I'm uncomfortable. It was almost 11 p.m. when we decided to just get on our bikes and leave. It was dark and we had to ride through some bad neighborhoods, but we made it safe to my buddy's house. Vinny's mother would also later call our parents and leave some cryptic messages, which implied trouble. Vinny was pulled from school about a week later, and we never saw him again. I don't know what that family was into. Maybe it wasn't creepy at all, and I just didn't understand. All I know is that we felt uncomfortable. I have no issues with religion, but if this was part of their practice, I think it's a little weird. Yes, it is. Out of curiosity, I went to find Vinny on Facebook. All I can confirm is that he, his mother, father, and one of his sisters had died. There were no public records of what happened to them or if they even died at the same time. Probably not the creepiest story out there, but one I still come back to. It's worth the tell, and it's an interesting memory. Wow, they passed away. That's damn. That's weird. I don't like that story. Because like Van Meditation said, right? I get it if it's your religion. I don't hate on anybody because of their religion. None of that. But there are some things that are like, how does this tie into your religion? You can tell when you're making people uncomfortable, and I don't understand why you have a house full of teenage boys and you're possibly doing the do with, multiple people, and it was loud enough for them to hear, and obviously wasn't that late. They're teenage boys. I don't know. It just seems bizarre. And like the whole bathing, the covered mirrors, it just seems, I don't know. Maybe they do some weird ritual stuff. I mean, I don't know. I'm not one to judge, but that kind of freaks me out. All right. This one is by Danica Darkhand. Creepy man stalking us on a camping trip. No. Okay, to set the stage for this story, we must go back to the far-off year of 1988. The location is the Cascade Mountains of Oregon. I was 10 years old, and with me was my mom, dad, best friend, and our golden retriever, Amber. We were very much an outdoor family and had many camping trips before this and since. But to this day, when I think about it, I still remember the terror I felt that weekend so long ago. After a brief talk with my father recently, it kind of came back to the front of my mind. He also was able to fill in a few details that I had forgotten. This holiday was like many others. We packed up the station wagon with everything we would need for a hike into one of our favorite lakes to camp at. To make this trip even more exciting for me was the fact it was my birthday weekend and I got to pick this lake. After we arrived at the trailhead and got our packs on, my dad got his sidearm out and strapped it on his belt. In Oregon, open carry was permitted in national forests, and my dad always had a gun on his hip while in the woods, which always added a sense of security. Facts. We had a close call with a bear one time in which it came in handy. Oh my god. My family, side note, is not a very big camping family. Like, I went camping when I was younger with my grandparents, but they always had like a trailer, so we weren't like roughing it, but I definitely would have a weapon with me if it were legal, because you never know. Bears, hills have eyes, people. You never, you know what I mean? I don't know. So good call with dad. The lake was about a 4-mile moderate hike in some thick forest, but the trail itself was well maintained and was never very busy, so it was going to be a very pleasant hike in. We started off on our hike, and back in the 80s, it wasn't uncommon to have your dog off leash on the trails in the forest, so we let Amber run and do her thing. She was a good dog and never ran off for too long or jumped on people. She did love people though, and speaking of people, we had not seen anyone else on the trail after about 2 miles in on the hike, which was nice since it was just all of us talking, laughing, and enjoying nature. My best friend and I started to hike ahead of everyone else because we were so energized and excited about finding the first and best tent spot once we got to the lake. Amber was bounding ahead of us and having a great time too. We were about 20 yards ahead of my parents when Amber stopped dead in her tracks. I thought she maybe saw a chipmunk or something, maybe a bird, but her hackles came up and she let out the lowest of growls. She never growls, so we stopped walking, and I thought maybe a bear or deer or something was just off the trail and she saw or heard it. We immediately started walking backwards, and my parents caught up to us. My dad asked us what was going on. I told him that Amber is up the trail and is growling at something. He tells us girls to stay back with my mom, and he walks ahead to where Amber was at on the trail. My dad gets up to her and looks around. I hear Amber whimper a bit while looking off the trail. My dad confronts her and calls her back and walks back to us. He says it must have been an animal and he didn't see anything right off the trail or ahead of us. He says to let him take the lead and we continue to hike. It didn't take long before it was forgotten, and Amber and the rest of us are all having a good time again. We arrived at the lake, and much to my delight, there was no one else camping. The water was clean and blue, and the shade from the trees made the whole scene just perfect. My friend and I found the best spot to set up our tent, and my parents followed suit. After we had camp set up, my folks went off to fish just down the hill, and my friend and I took off with Amber to walk around to the other side of the lake to catch salamanders. We only made it about an eighth of a mile when Amber stopped and started to growl. We stopped and looked around and heard brush rustling. Then, right in front of us, a man walked out of the trees. Amber stayed right by our sides and started to bare her teeth. He was taller than my dad, so at least 6'4", was very skinny, but had very broad shoulders. He was clean cut and was wearing black jeans and a white polo shirt with loafers. Like, when I read that a man walked out of the trees, I was assuming like a literal Hills Have Eyes inbred back mountains, like not a clean cut person wearing clean clothes, let alone loafers. Like, what the hell? I mean, he didn't look like he had hiked at all or was even dressed for the outdoors. He almost looked like he came out of church. We just stood there trying to process the situation when Amber began to bark. The guy just stood there, not moving, and he smiled like the creepiest smile. It felt like someone who thought that was what a smile was supposed to look like. Amber kept barking, and this got my parents' attention, and they looked up to us and called out for us to come back. We complied and started to walk back towards them. My dad met us halfway and told us to go back to the campsite, and he was going to talk to this guy. We got back to our camp, and my mom sat with us. I could hear my dad asking the guy if he needed help or if he was a fellow camper who had just set up a camp away from the lake. My dad was being polite and calm, but I could see he was on guard and trying to feel out the situation. Now is the time to mention that my dad was ex-Army and could be very intimidating when needed. The conversation continues. The guy told my dad he was just on a walk and did not mean to intrude on us. The guy says goodbye and walks back into the woods. Why the fuck is he walking? Why are you walking in the woods with loafers on? I have so many questions. My dad walked back to camp, sat down, and told us that he thinks the guy may just be a yuppie camper and doesn't know much about the outdoors. But my dad said that he got a weird vibe off him and would be keeping an eye out for him. Amber stayed by our side and was calm, yet she kept looking towards the direction the guy went. A bit more time goes by, and we have a nice campfire going, and the sun was starting to set. We cooked some dinner and made s'mores afterwards. Yum! My friend and I decided to go to our tent and read some books and tell each other some scary stories. Amber followed us to the tent and laid right outside of the door. My parents walked down to the lake to sit, have a beer, and just chill. They were never more than 50 yards away. Not long after my parents walked away, I hear Amber start to growl. Then we hear footsteps coming from the woods behind our tent. No, thank you. It's like, oh my God. My friend and I turn off our flashlight and go quiet to listen. The footsteps stopped at the edge of the woods. We then hear heavy breathing and a grunting sound. Amber starts to bark, and we then hear the footsteps retreat to the woods. Amber whimpers a bit, and I then hear my parents walking back to the camp. I go out and tell them what happened. My dad said that he heard Amber barking, and that's why they came back. I asked my dad what we should do. What is going on, and what if that strange guy was the one creeping around? He tells me that we'll see about moving camp in the morning since we still have 3 days left on the trip and nothing's happened to warrant just leaving. But he said that we'll play it by ear and be a little more vigilant, and if something changes, we'll decide what to do next. He tells us to try to get some sleep, and we all turn in for the night. Would you be able to get some sleep? I don't think I would be able to get some sleep because there's a weirdo creeping around and you're out in the woods. What did she say? 4 miles? A 4-mile hike out into the woods? Who the hell is going to come and save you? Yeah, try to get some sleep, guys. Go ahead. The next morning, we get up and have breakfast. After breakfast, we head down to the lake to fish. It was a beautiful day, and we were having so much fun, the events from the prior day were almost forgotten. We decided around lunchtime that we would go for a short hike to the waterfall that's up from the lake. We were gone for only about an hour, and when we came back, we found our tents open and our sleeping bags drug out on the ground. My dad tells us to hang back with Mom, and he goes to investigate. He comes back and says nothing is missing, but it wasn't an animal that did this. He says we should break camp, hike back to the car, and find another spot to camp for the next couple of days. I could tell my dad was not wanting to frighten us, but I heard the urgency in his voice. I was very disappointed, but if it meant we could enjoy the rest of the trip and not worry about some creep messing with us, then it was worth it. We broke camp and started our hike back. Dad was in the lead, and we were double timing it and made it back to car in record time. As we walk over to the car, we see that one of our tires was flat. Not a big deal. We always had a spare. But when my dad bent down to start taking the lugs off, he swore. It was not just flat. Someone slashed the tire. Dad changed the tire in record time, and we threw everything in the car, and he goes to turn the car on, but it wouldn't start. Dad swears, gets out of the car, pops the hood. He says, "Shit!" It turns out someone took our spark plug wires. Old cars, like that Chevy wagon, didn't have internal hood releases. You could just pop the hood from the outside. Dad slams the hood, says some very colorful words, and kicks some rocks. We were stuck, and no one else was at the trailhead. We were stranded. Sound familiar? Sound familiar, Mr. Loafers in the Woods? Dick. My parents are calm under pressure, and after a few minutes of discussion, it was decided that Dad would start walking down the road until he could hitch a ride to town and go to the parts store. Mom and the rest of us were going to wait with the car and look for someone to hopefully pull into the trailhead and help us. A few hours go by, and no one has come to the trailhead. It's getting hot, and we're hungry and tired. My mom makes us some lunch, and we go sit under a tree to cool off. Amber by our side, and everything was calm. But then we hear a voice. Amber leaps up and starts to whimper. The creepy guy from yesterday comes down the trail and is asking my mom if we need help. My mom tells him we're fine, that it's being settled, and my dad will be back soon. This creep then tells her that his camp is close and he's parked on the old fire road that's near the lake and asks us if we would like to come back to his camp and wait until my dad returns. Mom sternly tells him no. Exactly. Thank you, Mom. That we'll just wait here and thanks anyways. He didn't like this. He tells my mom that it's not safe out here for a pretty lady and 2 young girls. My mom, like my dad, is no pushover and asserts herself again that we do not need any help and to just please leave us alone. The guy stands there, smiles wide, and then just turns around and leaves. My mom is visibly shaken, and us girls were a bit scared. My mom comes over to us and tells us that we need to stay close, don't wander, and everything will be okay. My friend and I really kind of freaked out, and are just hoping my dad will make it back soon. Another 30 minutes goes by. The creepy guy comes back. This time, though, he's not alone. A slightly younger man was with him. The other guy is dressed as a yuppie camper and had a very stern look on his face. My mother stands her ground as they approach. Amber starts to low growl, and her hackles go up. The two guys flank us, and one of them flashes a gun tucked into his belt. The older guy tells us that we need to go with them and that they weren't asking. My mom backs up next to us and without taking her eyes off them, reaches to her belt and pulls out her Bowie knife. My mom said we will not be going and that they need to leave now. The two men didn't even flinch at this and said that we will come with them or they'll hurt us. At this moment, though, Amber goes from just growling to barking and puts herself between us and them. This makes the guys stop. My mom yells that they need to leave now. They start backing up, and at that moment, we hear a truck pulling into the trailhead parking lot. At the sight of the truck, the guys start to walk away fast and disappear into the tree line. What the hell, dude? Like, that's so scary. The truck was a forest ranger, and he had my dad with him. My dad jumped out of the truck and ran over to us, asking if we were okay. The ranger came over and asked who those men were and if we were okay. My mom explained everything while my dad hugged us and told us we'll be okay. The ranger takes off, looking for the men. My dad tells us that he was about 5 miles from the town when the ranger picked him up and took him the rest of the way to get the part for the car. He then drove him back to the car. After hearing what happened, my dad was pissed and wanted to find the guys who tried to kidnap us and that had been terrorizing us for the past 24 hours. The ranger came back and told us he'd almost caught up to them, but they sped away in their truck with a camper in tow. They had been parked behind a small ridge behind the lake on an old logging road. He didn't get a plate, but he radioed a description of the men in their truck and camper to the local sheriff's office. He also took our information and said he would pass it on to them. He waited with us until Dad had the car fixed and we were able to leave. We decided to not continue camping seriously and instead drive a couple of hours to spend the last 2 days of the trip at the beach and stay in a hotel. A few days later, a deputy called my dad and told him they never found the men. He said that it was most likely a crime of opportunity after seeing a woman with 2 girls in tow. He was sure they had been watching us from off the trail and had messed with our camp to judge how my dad would react. When my dad seemed to be too big of a threat, they sabotaged our car, hoping to put us in a position where we were vulnerable. He said they would follow up with us if they found out anything else. But according to my dad, nothing ever came of it. Dude, can you imagine? Like, I don't know. You guys will come to learn that I have a lot of, I don't want to say I have a lot of fears, but a lot of things, like, I think too much. That's something that I think a lot about. Like, if I were to go camping or just, I don't know. I'm always super, like, hyper vigilant of my surroundings, and it's just a fear for me for people to be, like, sitting watching and you can't see them. Like, the same thing from the other story. Somebody just being out in the middle of the trees, hiding, ducking behind a tree and you can't see them. That's scary to me. And I feel like that's a violation against a person. Like, when they can't see you, but you see them and you're just sitting there watching them like a fucking weirdo. I don't know. All right, let's do one more because that last one was kind of long. Okay, this one is by Itchy-Bandicoot-5574. When I was little, maybe 4 or 6, I had this imaginary friend. There was nothing out of the ordinary with him except his name was Dark. Pause. Red flag. Imaginary friends. No thank you. Little kids and imaginary friends. Yes. Some kids do have real imaginary friends where it's just in their mind. It is literally an imaginary friend. And you play pretend, you make things up. But from my experience, it can also not be an imaginary friend. It can be something less than nice, something nefarious, talking to your children. And, you know, I assume if you're watching my videos that you believe in the same kind of things I believe in. So, no, thank you. But let's continue. I also recall liking hanging out with him because he was an adult and so mature. He had an apartment and a car, etc. Here's what's really interesting though. His apartment was behind our new couch, and it was attached to the couch. This really freaked out my parents because I only started to hang out with Dark after they got some old furniture from my grandma's house, including that couch. Around this time, some truly terrifying shit went down at this house. My brother, maybe 13, was in the shower and something pulled the curtains back completely, and everyone can vouch for this as my brother ran out naked, scared shitless. He was clearly not comfortable being naked in the middle of the house, but he was so terrified he couldn't stop and get dressed. Fast forward to when we moved and got rid of that couch, I never saw Dark again, and these unexplainable experiences ceased. So was it just a coincidence, and I just had an active imagination, or was I friends with a ghost? You know, I personally, like I said, I'm very superstitious. I believe in a lot of these things, a lot of dark things, a lot of occult things. And I mentioned also I'm Mexican, and my grandma and my dad have always told me not to get secondhand furniture. Don't get furniture from a yard sale. Don't, you know, any item really, because you don't know what can be attached to those items. And obviously, like, you can go through and, you know, whatever you guys believe in, whatever method you want to use, you can sage stuff or, you know, do like a little blessing over it or prayer over it or whatever. But I really don't have the time to do that, and I don't want stuff like that to happen because I feel like that really can happen, you know, like when you have, say, that person said that it was from their grandma's house. You don't know how long your grandma had it. You don't know if your grandma bought it brand new, or if she got it from somebody. You don't know how long that piece of furniture, you know, if it's really old, the little sticker is going to be gone and disintegrated by now. But you never know, and energy attaches to items, or, you know, if, I don't know, I wouldn't recommend it. Because, you know, I read these stories all the time. Like, people will buy a mirror and their weird shit will be happening because of the mirror. They'll see stuff in the mirror moving, or, you know, have nightmares and the mirror is like above, you know, above them on the wall. I just wouldn't recommend it. If you do, though, you know, take care of it. Do a blessing, sage it, you know, tell whatever, you know, speak out loud and say, you're not welcome here. You know, anything attached to this needs to leave. I don't want you here, you know, stuff like that. But that was a few stories to read to you guys. I hope you liked them. Tell me what your opinions are of them in the comments. They're not really, I would say those, you know, they're little creepy stories to make you think. I really want to get into some ghost stories, some paranormal experience things. So let me know if you guys want to share your stories. Go ahead. I think I'm going to open either an email or like a Dropbox, because I do want people to share their personal stories with me and allow me to read them. That's really what I want to do. So let me know, you know. Write a comment. Tell me what you think. Don't forget to subscribe and come back for more. Thanks, guys.